The woman who gave birth to the son I have raised for 5 years just looked me in the eye and told me I was nothing more than a free babysitter for her $2 million investment. I am currently sitting in my car, shaking so violently that I cannot even put the key in the ignition, staring at the legal document that threatens to destroy my entire existence. My name is Ruby Miller, and I made a fatal mistake that has cost me my freedom years ago. Out of pure desperation to be a mother, I handed an envelope containing $10,000 in cash to a grandmother named Brenda and her pregnant daughter, Kayla. I thought I was saving an innocent baby from poverty, but I was actually walking into a trap set by two of the most calculating monsters I have ever met. They do not want this child because they love him. They want him because they discovered he is the secret sole heir to a massive trust fund. They manipulated my wife and me into raising him, paying for his medical bills, and nurturing him through the hard years, just so they could swoop in and reclaim him the moment he becomes a walking paycheck. I am an architect who builds safe homes for others, yet I have let the wolves right through my own front door. Now, they are threatening to expose my illegal payment and send me to prison if I do not comply with their insane demands. How do you fight a war against a biological mother when the law is on her side? I am about to lose my son, my wife, and my life. Please, I am begging you. Tell me, what would you do if you were in my place? My name is Ruby Miller. I am 32 years old, a senior architect at one of the most prestigious firms in Seattle, and I live in a house that echoes. It is a beautiful house, a craftsman-style renovation in the Queen Anne neighborhood that I designed myself. It has skylights that catch the gray Pacific Northwest rain, heated floors, and a chef's kitchen that has never seen a birthday cake. To the outside world, my life is a curated Pinterest board of success. I have a career, a stunning home, and a wife, Chloe, who loves me with a patience I do not deserve. But if you strip away the layers of paint and the staging furniture, I am just a woman haunted by a ghost that has not even been born yet. The silence in our house is not peaceful. It is predatory. It lives primarily in the room at the end of the hallway. We call it the guest room, but that is a lie. It is painted a soft, gender-neutral sage green. There is a crib in the corner that cost more than my first car, covered by a sheet so dust will not settle on the mattress. Every time I walk past that door, I feel a physical ache in my chest, a hollow space where my uterus failed me 3 times, 3 rounds of in vitro fertilization, 3 heartbeats that flickered and went out. It was this desperation that led me to the dark corners of the internet. Late at night, while Chloe slept beside me, her breathing steady and rhythmic, I would scroll through private adoption forums and support groups. That was where I found the post. The username was Kayla Saved, and the subject line was simple: looking for a loving home for my baby boy. I should have woken Chloe up. I should have called a lawyer immediately. Instead, I messaged her. 3 days later, we were sitting in a booth at a 24-hour diner off the interstate, watching the rain streak against the greasy glass. Chloe was next to me, her hand gripping her coffee cup so hard her knuckles were white. Across from us sat the mother and daughter duo who would unravel our lives. Mrs. Brenda was not what I expected, yet she was exactly what I wanted to see. She was a woman in her mid-50s with a perm that seemed frozen in time and a cardigan adorned with a small American flag pin. A large, gold crucifix rested on her chest, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She had the kind of face that screamed church bake sale volunteer, warm and inviting, but her eyes were sharp, darting around the room like a bird of prey, scanning for movement. Beside her was Kayla. She was 19. Though she looked younger, she was undeniably pretty in a fragile, broken way. With blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun and an oversized hoodie that hid the bump of her belly. She was chewing gum with an open mouth, scrolling through her phone, completely detached from the conversation that would decide the fate of the life growing inside her. "We just want what is best for the little angel," Brenda said, her voice dripping with a sugary, Midwestern drawl. She reached out and patted my hand. Her skin was dry and paper thin. When Kayla told me she was not ready to be a mother, I prayed on it. I asked the Lord to send us good, Christian people, well, or at least moral people. "You two seem very stable." I flinched slightly at the pause, but I forced a smile. "We are, Brenda. I own my firm, and Chloe is a graphic designer. We have a college fund already started. We have a room ready." "A room," Kayla muttered, not looking up from her phone. "Must be nice." "Kayla, manners," Brenda scolded gently, though her eyes remained fixed on me. "My daughter has had a hard time. Ruby, she was set to go to college. You know, she had dreams. But then this blessing happened. The father is out of the picture. A bad seed. We are doing this alone." I leaned forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. "We want to help. We are willing to pay for all medical expenses, legal fees, counseling." Brenda said, a long, theatrical exhale that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "It is not just the medical bills, honey. It is the stress, the debt. You know, stress produces cortisol, and cortisol is poison for a developing fetus. Poor Kayla is drowning in credit card debt. $10,000. It was for school supplies and necessities, but the collectors are calling day and night. It is terrifying her. I am afraid she might miscarry from the anxiety." Beside me, Chloe stiffened. I felt her foot nudge mine under the table. It was a warning, a clear, desperate signal. This is wrong. This is illegal. This is a shakedown. I looked at Kayla. She finally looked up from her phone. Her eyes were wide, watery, and perfectly sad. She looked at her stomach, then at me. "I just want him to be okay," Kayla whispered. "But I cannot sleep. I cannot eat." Inner monologue. I knew it was a lie. Somewhere, deep in the lizard brain that controls survival instincts, I knew a girl who buys school supplies does not rack up $10,000 in debt. They were playing a script. But then I looked at her stomach again. There was a baby in there. A boy. My son. He was right there, across the table, surrounded by the smell of bacon, grease, and cheap perfume. If I walked away, someone else would take him. Or worse, he would stay with them. "We can help with that," I said. My voice sounded foreign, like it was coming from someone else. "Ruby," Chloe whispered, her voice tight. "Can we talk about this outside for a second?" "No," I said, a little too loudly. I did not look at my wife. I could not look at her, because I knew I would see the disappointment in her eyes. I reached into my purse. I had gone to the bank that morning. I had told the teller it was for a contractor. I pulled out a thick, white envelope. It contained $10,000 in cash. Brenda's eyes did not widen. They narrowed slightly, calculating. She did not reach for it immediately. She let it sit on the table between the ketchup bottle and the sugar dispenser. "We cannot accept payment for a baby, Ruby," Brenda said, her voice dropping to a whisper. That would be illegal. We are not selling anything. It is not for the baby. I said, pushing the envelope an inch closer. It is a gift to help Kayla with her stress, so the baby can be healthy. It is humanitarian aid. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. Brenda smiled then. It was not the warm, church lady smile from before. It was something else. It was the smile of a fisherman who just felt the line go taut. She placed her hand over the envelope and slid it smoothly into her oversized purse. You are a godsend. Ruby, Brenda said. Truly, the Lord works in mysterious ways. Kayla popped a bubble with her gum and went back to her phone. I sat back in the booth, my hands trembling beneath the table. I had just committed a crime. I had just ignored my wife's intuition. I had just bought my way into a nightmare. But as I looked at the rain washing down the window, all I could think was that finally, the nursery would not be empty anymore. I did not know it then, but I had not just paid off a debt. I had paid the down payment on my own destruction. 2 weeks after the meeting at the diner, the sanctuary of my home was breached. It started with a phone call from Brenda, her voice tight with a panic that sounded rehearsed. She claimed their landlord was threatening eviction because of the noise Kayla made during her morning sickness. She claimed the stress was causing Kayla to have contractions. She claimed they had nowhere else to go. The solution she proposed was convenient. Too convenient. She suggested they move into the studio apartment on the ground floor of our house. It was a renovated space with a separate entrance that Chloe and I used as a home office or for visiting guests. Brenda argued that being close would allow us to bond with the baby before birth. She called it nesting. Chloe called it an invasion. We stood in the kitchen, the granite island acting as a barricade between my wife and me. Chloe was chopping vegetables with a force that threatened to crack the cutting board. She told me this was a bad idea. Ruby, she said, we were letting strangers into our sanctuary. She said once they were in, we would never get them out. I leaned against the refrigerator, rubbing my temples. I told her it was only for 3 months. I told her we had to prioritize the baby. I told her that if Kayla was stressed, the baby was stressed. I used the very words Brenda had planted in my head, weaponizing my own desperation against my wife. Chloe eventually stopped chopping. She put the knife down and looked at me with eyes that were tired and resigned. She told me I was making a mistake, but she would support me. They moved in the next day. They did not come with a few bags as expected. They came with a U-Haul truck. The transformation was immediate and terrifying. The studio, once a minimalist space of mid-century modern furniture and soft lighting, was quickly cluttered with boxes, cheap porcelain figurines, and piles of laundry. But it was not just the physical space they consumed. It was the atmosphere. Brenda began to treat my credit card like a personal grant from the government. The first grocery bill she handed me made my stomach drop. It was for $500 from Whole Foods. When I looked at the receipt, I did not see essentials. I saw organic macadamia nut milk, imported Swiss chocolate, saffron, and $60 jars of Manuka honey. When I gently asked about the cost, Brenda laughed. She was sitting on my patio furniture, drinking iced tea, while Kayla lay on the lounger, scrolling through Instagram. Brenda told me that a developing brain needs the highest quality nutrients. She asked if I wanted the baby to be intelligent or if I wanted to cut corners. She made me feel cheap for questioning why a 19-year-old needed truffle oil to grow a fetus. I paid the bill. I always paid the bill, but the money was manageable. I was an architect. I made a good living. What was harder to swallow was the way Brenda spoke to Chloe. It was never direct. It was always wrapped in a layer of sickening sweetness. A poison pill coated in sugar. One rainy Tuesday evening, I came home late from the firm to find Chloe cleaning the kitchen. Brenda was sitting at the counter, watching her. Brenda was eating a pint of premium gelato that Chloe had bought for herself as a treat. Brenda looked at me and smiled. She said it was so nice to have a wife who was handy with chores. She turned to Chloe and said that since Chloe did not have to worry about the physical toll of pregnancy or the hormones of a real mother, she had so much more energy to keep the house tidy. The silence that followed was deafening. Chloe froze. Her back was to Brenda, but I saw her shoulders tense up. The phrase real mother hung in the air like a foul odor. Brenda had used the wrong pronouns for Chloe twice that week, correcting herself with a giggle and an apology that felt more like an insult. I stepped forward, my briefcase heavy in my hand. I told Brenda that Chloe was going to be this child's mother just as much as I was. I tried to sound firm, but my voice wavered. I did not want to anger the woman who controlled the vessel carrying my son. Brenda waved her spoon dismissively. She said she did not mean anything by it. She said she was just old-fashioned and that I should not be so sensitive. She said stress was bad for the baby. Looking pointedly at the ceiling towards the studio where Kayla was sleeping. Later that night, Chloe and I lay in bed in the darkness. The rain drummed against the skylight. Chloe whispered that she felt like a stranger in her own home. She said Brenda looked at her like she was a biology experiment gone wrong. She asked me to kick them out. She pleaded with me to find them an apartment across town and pay the rent for them there instead. I closed my eyes. I pictured the empty nursery. I pictured the little shoes I had bought and hidden in my drawer. I turned to Chloe and kissed her forehead. I told her to just hang on a little longer. I told her that once the baby was born, they would leave. I told her we had to keep our eyes on the prize. Inner monologue. I was a coward. I lay there listening to the hum of the heater, and I knew I was selling my wife's dignity for a child. Every time Brenda sneered at Chloe, I swallowed my rage because I was terrified that if I fought back, Brenda would pack up Kayla and that belly and disappear. I was being held hostage in my own house, but I convinced myself I was the one holding the keys. I told myself it was sacrifice, but deep down, as I stared at the ceiling, I wondered if a child born from this much toxicity could ever really be free of it. Downstairs, I heard a crash, then laughter, then the loud thumping of bass from a stereo. It was 2 a.m. Kayla was awake. The studio directly below our bedroom had become a nightclub. I went to get up, to go down there and tell them to turn it off. But then I stopped. I remembered the threat about cortisol. I remembered the $10,000. I pulled the pillow over my head and pretended I could not hear the sound of my life fracturing. This was only the beginning. The cracks were small now, hairline fractures in the foundation, but the weight was building, and soon, the whole house would come down. The notification on my phone screen was the only thing illuminating the darkened living room. It was an alert from American Express. Another charge, $350 at a boutique maternity store in downtown Seattle. That was the third alert in 2 hours. Brenda and Kayla were out, ostensibly for a doctor's appointment. But it had turned into a spree funded by my guilt and their entitlement. I was sitting on the sofa, nursing a glass of cold white wine, trying to enjoy the rare silence. The house usually smelled like Brenda's cloying vanilla perfume or the stale scent of Kayla's onion chips. But with the windows open, the crisp Pacific breeze was finally reclaiming the space. I closed my eyes, trying to imagine the nursery upstairs, occupied by a sleeping infant. Trying to remember why I was enduring this invasion, I stood up to refill my glass, and that was when I saw it. Brenda had left her handbag. It was a gargantuan thing, a faux leather monstrosity with gold buckles that sat on my pristine white Barcelona chair like a stain. It was open, its mouth gaping wide, revealing a chaotic interior of candy wrappers, tissues, and old receipts. I stared at it. I should have just ignored it. I should have walked into the kitchen and poured my wine, but something about that bag pulled at me. It was the physical manifestation of the woman who was slowly dismantling my marriage. I told myself I was just going to move it off the expensive leather chair, to put it on the entry table where it belonged. I reached out and grabbed the straps. The bag was heavier than it looked. As I lifted it, the balance shifted. The bag tipped. The contents cascaded onto my hardwood floor. Lipsticks rolled under the sofa. A half-eaten granola bar slid across the rug, and a thick manila folder, heavy and bound with a rubber band, landed with a dull thud. I sighed, annoyed that I now had to clean up their mess even when they were not here. I knelt down, gathering the lipsticks in the trash. I reached for the folder last. The rubber band had snapped off in the fall, and the cover had flipped open. Saúde 2 routes Grüße, als I froze. The document on top was not a medical record. It was not a bill. It was printed on thick, high-quality bond paper, the kind used by expensive law firms. The header was embossed in black ink. Last will and testament of Arthur J. Sterling. I knew that name. Everyone in Seattle knew that name. Arthur Sterling was a real estate mogul who had owned half the skyline. He had died of a heart attack 6 months ago. The tabloids had been full of it. My heart began to hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I looked around the empty room, feeling like a thief in my own home. I should put it back. I should not read this. But my hand moved on its own, turning the page. Inner monologue. Why would Brenda, a woman who claimed to be drowning in debt for school supplies, have the legal documents of a dead millionaire in her purse? The math did not add up. The poverty, the desperation, the $10,000 I had handed them in cash. Saúde 2 hash is greater than it all felt suddenly. Violently wrong. My architect's brain, trained to spot structural flaws, was screaming that the foundation of this entire arrangement was rotten. I sat cross-legged on the floor and began to read. The legal jargon was dense, but the meaning was clear enough. I skipped past the distribution of properties and cars. I found the section labeled Beneficiaries. There, in black and white, was the name Kayla Marie Johnson, but it was not Kayla who was the beneficiary. It was her unborn child. The text swam before my eyes. I blinked, forcing myself to focus. The clause stated that the unborn child of Kayla Marie Johnson, proven by paternity test to be the biological issue of Arthur J. Sterling, was the sole beneficiary of a specific trust fund. I read the number 3 times to be sure I was not hallucinating. $2 million. The breath left my lungs in a sharp hiss. $2 million. But it was the next paragraph, the fine print, that made my blood run cold. It was titled, Conditions of Release. The funds would only be released to the child upon their 18th birthday. However, the release was contingent upon the child being raised in a stable, 2-parent household with no criminal record, maintaining a specific grade point average, and having no history of juvenile delinquency. Then came the kicker. If the biological mother, Kayla Marie Johnson, is deemed unfit, unable, or unwilling to provide said environment, the trust grants a monthly stipend of $5,000 to the appointed legal guardians for the care of the child, with the bulk of the inheritance remaining locked until the child reaches the age of majority. I dropped the paper. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely pick it up again. This was not a mistake. This was a heist. They did not want a loving home for the baby. They did not care about my nursery or my desire to be a mother. They needed a clean record. They needed a stable address. They needed someone to do the hard work, to tick the boxes required by the dead man's lawyers, so that the money would stay secure until they could get their hands on it. I was not a mother to them. I was a free babysitter. I was a laundry service. I was a boarding school. Inner monologue. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to swallow back bile. I thought about the $10,000. I thought about the organic groceries. I thought about how I had scolded Chloe for being suspicious. We were being played. They were not poor. They were just waiting for the payout. They were using my home as an incubator to secure a fortune that the baby would probably never see, because people like Brenda and Kayla would find a way to drain it dry the moment they got control. I looked at the date on the document. It was signed 3 months ago. They knew the entire time. When they sat in that diner and cried about credit card debt, they knew they were carrying a $2 million lottery ticket. I heard the rumble of a car engine in the driveway. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my system. They were back. I scrambled. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table. My fingers were clumsy, slipping on the screen. I opened the camera app. I snapped a photo of the first page, then the page with the dollar amount, then the page with the conditions. The flash was off. Thank God. But my hands were shaking so much the first picture was blurry. I took it again. The car door slammed outside. I heard Brenda's voice, shrill and complaining about the rain. I told you not to buy those heels. Kyla, you are going to break your neck. Shut up. Mom, it is Ruby's money anyway. The sound of the key turning in the front door lock was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I shoved the papers back into the folder. I jammed the folder back into the bag. I threw the granola bar and the lipsticks in on top of it, not caring about the order. I heaved the bag back onto the chair just as the front door swung open. Brenda walked in, shaking a wet umbrella. She looked at me. I was standing in the middle of the living room, clutching my wine glass with both hands, my knuckles white. "Oh, hello, Ruby," Brenda said, her eyes instantly scanning the room. She looked at me, then at the chair. Her gaze lingered on the bag for a fraction of a second too long. "You look saluting Holleen. Do dièse est supérieur à pal. Is everything all right?" I forced a smile. It felt like a mask of cracking plaster. "I am fine," I said. My voice was too high. I cleared my throat. "Just a long week." "How was the doctor?" Kayla waddled in behind her, carrying 3 large shopping bags. She did not even look at me. She just dropped the bags on the floor and kicked her shoes off, leaving them right in the middle of the hallway. "Doctor was fine," Kayla said, popping her gum. "Baby is big." "Whatever." Brenda walked over to the chair and picked up her purse. She held it close to her body, her eyes narrowing slightly as she looked at me. "Did you move my bag, dear?" she asked. The sweetness in her voice was gone, replaced by a razor-sharp edge. It looked like it was going to fall. I just pushed it back. Brenda stared at me for a long moment. I stopped breathing. I could feel the phone in my pocket burning against my thigh, holding the digital evidence of their deception. Finally, she smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "You are always so helpful. What would we do without you?" She turned and headed towards the basement stairs, calling for Kayla to follow. I waited until I heard the door to the studio click shut. Then I sank onto the floor, right there on the hardwood, and buried my face in my hands. I did not cry. I was past crying. The sadness was evaporating, burned away by a new, unfamiliar heat rising in my chest. I took my phone out and looked at the photos again. $2 million. Chloe was right. Brenda was a monster. But they had made a mistake. They had underestimated me. They thought I was just a desperate, barren woman with a checkbook. They did not realize that an architect's job is to see the structure of things, to find the load-bearing walls, and to know exactly where to place the dynamite to bring the whole thing down. I stood up. I finished my wine in one gulp. Then I went to find my wife. The call came at 2 a.m, piercing the silence of the house like a siren. It was not a phone call, but a scream from the basement studio. Kayla's water had broken. The drive to Swedish Medical Center was a blur of rain-slicked asphalt and red taillights. I drove with white-knuckled intensity, my heart racing with the primal adrenaline that comes with imminent life. Beside me, Chloe was trying to time the contractions, her voice calm and steady. In the back seat, however, the dynamic was entirely wrong. There was no wonder, no fearful anticipation. Kayla was not breathing through the pain. She was complaining about the leather seats of my Audi being uncomfortable. Brenda was not soothing her daughter. She was frantically checking her makeup in a compact mirror, ensuring she looked presentable for the nurses. When we arrived at the maternity ward, the facade of our happy extended family began to crumble under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital. The labor was long and grueling, spanning 14 hours. For most of it, Kayla lay in the hospital bed, scrolling through TikTok, the blue light of the phone illuminating her bored expression. She only put the device down during the peak of a contraction, screaming obscenities at the nurses, at me, and even at the baby inside her. "Get this thing out of me," she yelled, her face twisted, not just in pain, but in genuine resentment. "I am so done with this." I stood in the corner of the room, feeling like an intruder at my own funeral. I wanted to hold her hand. I wanted to whisper words of encouragement, but every time I stepped forward, Brenda was there. She was a physical barrier, a wall of floral perfume and passive-aggressive exclusion. "Give her space, Ruby," Brenda would say, her voice sickly sweet, but her eyes hard as flint. "She needs her mother right now. You would not understand the bond." Chloe stood by the door, her arms crossed, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of anger and helplessness. We were the ones paying for the private room. We were the ones who had bought the layette set waiting in the bag. Yet we were being treated like paparazzi trying to steal a photo. Then the moment arrived, the final push, the cry that should have shattered the world and put it back together again. A baby boy. The doctor placed the slick, crying infant onto Kayla's chest. The room went silent, waiting for that magical cinematic moment of maternal love. It never happened. Kayla looked down at the baby with a grimace, as if someone had placed a wet towel on her. She did not stroke his cheek. She did not kiss his head. She looked at the nurse and said, "Can you take him? I need to clean up. I feel gross." My heart broke. I stepped forward, my arms aching to hold the child I had paid for in sweat and tears and dignity. "I will take him," I said, my voice trembling, but Brenda was faster. She swooped in like a vulture claiming a carcass. "Grandma has him," she cooed, snatching the baby before I could reach the bed. She turned her back to me, shielding the infant from my view. "Oh, and look at you. You are a little sterling. Sao yu ting hao, ling. 2 is greater than I mean. A little star." She had almost slipped. She had almost said the name of the dead millionaire. I caught it, and the knowledge of the secret will burned in my pocket like a hot coal. For the next hour, I was not allowed to touch him. Brenda held him, rocking him, whispering into his ear, establishing a perimeter that I could not cross. When the nurse suggested that the adoptive mothers might want some skin-to-skin time, Brenda shut it down with a smile that showed too many teeth. "Oh, not yet," Brenda said smoothly. "The baby needs to imprint on his biological family first. It is crucial for his psychological development. We do not want to confuse the poor thing, do we?" She looked at me then, her eyes challenging me to argue. If I argued, I was the hysterical woman stressing out the new mother. If I stayed silent, I was complicit in my own erasure. I stepped out into the hallway to breathe. The air in the room was too thick, too heavy with lies. Chloe followed me. We stood by the vending machine, the hum of the compressor filling the silence between us. "This is insane." "Ruby," Chloe whispered, "did you see how Kayla looked at him? She does not care. And Brenda is acting like she is the gatekeeper of heaven." "I know," I said, leaning my head against the cold glass of the window. "I know. We need to call a lawyer." Chloe said, "Now, before they sign the birth certificate." Before I could answer, the door to the hospital room opened. Brenda stepped out. She closed the door softly behind her and walked towards us. She did not look like a grandmother who had just witnessed a miracle. She looked like a general surveying a battlefield. She ignored Chloe completely and walked straight to me. She took my arm and pulled me slightly away, isolating me from my wife. "Ruby, dear," she lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "we need to talk about the living arrangements when we get back." "What about them?" I asked, pulling my arm away. "It is about Sao yu ting hao lin. 2 Raute ist größer als Herr." Brenda tilted her head towards Chloe. "I have been doing some reading, you know, about children raised in Sao yu ting hao lin. 2 is greater than non-traditional environments. I am very concerned about the confusion it might cause the baby. And frankly, Chloe seems very volatile. Did you see how she was looking at me in there? It was aggressive." I stared at her, stunned. Chloe was the gentlest person I knew. Brenda was projecting her own malice onto my wife. "Chloe is my wife," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. "She is going to be his mother." Brenda sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "I am just saying." "Ruby, the courts, Sao yu ting hao ling, 2 is greater than, and the social workers, Sao yu ting hao ling, 2 is greater than they look at these things. If Kayla feels unsafe, if she feels her baby is being raised in a confused or hostile environment, she might change her mind. You know the adoption is not final until the revocation period is over. We would hate for anything to, Sao yu ting hao ling, to go wrong." It was a threat, a clear, naked threat. "Do what I say. Keep your wife away, or you will never see this baby again." Inner monologue. I looked at this woman, this grandmother in her floral cardigan, and I saw pure evil. She was using my desperation as a leash. She was weaponizing the legal system she was actively defrauding. She wanted to isolate me. She wanted to drive a wedge between Chloe and me so that I would be alone, weak, and compliant. She wanted me to be the perfect little nanny who paid the bills and asked no questions. I understand, I said. The words tasted like bile. Brenda patted my arm. Good. I knew you were the smart one. Now, why do you not go get Kayla a soda? She is thirsty. She turned and walked back into the room, leaving me standing in the hallway. I looked at Chloe. She was watching me, waiting for me to defend her, to scream, to do something, but I could not. Not yet. I had to play the long game. I had to let them think they had won. I walked over to the vending machine and bought a soda. The can rattled down the chute with a hollow clang. I was spiraling. I could feel it. The control I thought I had was an illusion. I was trapping myself in a web of lies to catch a spider. But I was beginning to fear that the spider was much, much bigger than I was. I walked back towards the room, the cold soda burning my hand. Through the viewing window, I saw the bassinet. The baby was sleeping, oblivious to the war being fought over his head. He was worth $2 million to them. He was worth my soul to me, and I was willing to lose everything else to make sure they never saw a dime. Bringing the baby home should have been the happiest day of my life. I had imagined this moment for years. I had pictured walking through the front door, the house smelling of fresh lavender, Chloe waiting with a camera, the soft hum of the lullaby machine drifting from the nursery. Instead, we walked into a house that smelled of stale pizza and tension. The air was thick, heavy enough to choke on. The baby, who we had decided to call Leo, was asleep in his car seat, a tiny bundle of innocence, unaware that he was the rope in a tug-of-war that was about to turn violent. Kayla went straight to the basement studio, complaining of soreness, leaving Leo on the dining room table like a bag of groceries. Brenda, however, did not follow her daughter. She walked into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of my expensive Chardonnay, and sat down at the head of our marble dining table. She patted the seat next to her, a gesture that was both inviting and commanding. Sit down, Ruby, she said. We have paperwork to discuss. I felt a surge of relief. Finally, the adoption papers. I had my attorney draft them months ago. Standard documents that would transfer parental rights from Kayla to Chloe and me. I rushed to my home office to retrieve the folder, my hands shaking with anticipation. I returned to the dining room, placing the crisp documents in front of Brenda. Chloe stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder. Seeking comfort, I uncapped a pen and offered it to Brenda. Sign here, I said, pointing to the line. And here, then we can file it with the court in the morning. Brenda did not take the pen. She looked at the papers, then looked at me, and let out a short, dry laugh. She pushed my documents aside as if they were junk mail. From her purse, that same bottomless pit of secrets, she pulled out a single, stapled document. It was crumpled at the corners. We have changed our minds, Brenda said calmly, taking a sip of wine. Kayla is not ready to give up her son. He is family. You do not just give away family. The room spun. I felt Chloe's grip on my shoulder tighten until it hurt. What are you talking about? I whispered. We had an agreement. Brenda smiled. It was a terrifying expression, devoid of any warmth. She slid her document toward me. We have a new proposal, she said. We call it a co-guardianship agreement. I looked down at the paper. The text was poorly formatted, likely typed up on a library computer, but the terms were crystal clear. It stated that Ruby Miller and Chloe Vance would be granted temporary physical custody of the child for a period of 10 years. During this time, we would be solely responsible for all housing, medical, and educational costs, specifically mandating enrollment in a private preparatory school at the conclusion of 10 years, or whenever Kayla Johnson felt emotionally ready. Full custody would revert to the biological mother. I stared at the words until they blurred. 10 years. They wanted us to raise him through the sleepless nights, the teething, the tantrums, and the potty training. They wanted us to pay for the best schools. And then, when he was 10 years old, the exact age the trust fund documents required for the first review of the child's well-being, they would take him back. They were not looking for parents. They were looking for premium, free babysitters who would foot the bill until the payout date. "This is a joke," I said, my voice rising. "I am not signing this. Get out of my house." I reached for Leo's car seat, intending to take him upstairs. To protect him from this madness, Brenda's voice stopped me cold. It was not loud, but it cut through the air like a whip. "If you touch that baby, Ruby, I will call the police." I froze. I turned to look at her. She was not bluffing. Her phone was already on the table, her finger hovering over the dial pad. "Call them," Chloe spat out, stepping forward. "Get out of our house. You are scammers." Brenda took another sip of wine, savoring it. "I would be careful," she said softly. "If the police come, I will have to tell them about the transaction. You know, the one at the diner? $10,000 in cash." I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees buckled, and I had to grab the edge of the table to stay upright. Brenda continued, her eyes locking onto mine. "In the state of Washington, giving money to a birth mother for anything other than court-approved medical expenses is considered baby selling. It is a Class C felony. It is human trafficking." "Ruby," she let the words hang there. "Human trafficking." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. "If I make that call," Brenda whispered, leaning in, "not only will they take the baby away and put him in foster care, but you will go to prison. You will lose your architecture license. You will lose this house. And you, Chloe, Xiaoyu Jinghaoling, 2# is greater than well. The police might wonder if you were an accomplice." The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the refrigerator humming and the soft breathing of the baby in the car seat. I looked at Chloe. She was pale, her eyes wide with terror. We both knew the system. We knew how it looked. A wealthy couple giving a desperate teenager a thick envelope of untraceable cash in a diner. It looked exactly like what Brenda said it was. I was trapped. I had walked into the cage, and now she had locked the door. Brenda tapped the paper with her manicured fingernail. "Here is how this is going to work," she said. "You are going to sign this paper. You are going to take care of my grandson. You are going to give him the best life money can buy. And in 10 years, we will reassess. If you treat us well, Xiaoyu, Jinghao, Ling, 2# is greater than maybe we will let you keep him a little longer. But he is ours. Do you understand?" My inner monologue screamed. I wanted to grab the wine bottle and smash it across her face. I wanted to burn the house down. I wanted to scream until my vocal cords shredded. The rage was a physical thing, a hot, molten ball in my stomach. She was enslaving us. She was using my love for a child I had known for 6 hours to destroy my life. But then, I looked at Leo. He shifted in his sleep, his tiny hand curling into a fist. If I fought her now, he would go to the system. He would be lost. If I went to prison, I could not protect him. I had to survive. To save him, I had to become something else. I had to stop being the victim. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady now. It was the steadiness of the dead. I will sign, I said. Ruby. No, Chloe gasped. I looked at my wife. My eyes were dry. I needed her to trust me, even though I could not tell her the plan yet. I signed the paper. The scratch of the pen against the cheap paper sounded like a gunshot. Brenda smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had just eaten its fill. I knew you were a reasonable woman. Ruby, she said. She stood up, finished her wine, and walked toward the basement door. Good night, she called out cheerfully. Do not let the baby cry too much. I need my beauty sleep. When the basement door clicked shut, I sank into the chair. I looked at the signature on the paper. It was my name, but the person who wrote it was gone. The Ruby Miller who believed in fairness and rules was dead. I looked at the baby. I reached out and touched his soft cheek. I promise you, I whispered to him, my voice barely audible. I will raise you. I will protect you, and I will destroy them. I pulled out my phone under the table. I did not call the police. I did not call my lawyer. I opened the calendar app and set a reminder. Not for tomorrow, not for next week. I was going to play the long game. They wanted a war? I would give them a massacre. But first, I had to be the perfect, obedient servant they thought they had bought. I looked up at Chloe. We are going to be fine, I told her. She looked at me like I was a stranger, and in a way, I was. The weeks that followed the signing of that cursed agreement were a blur of exhaustion and degradation. My home, once a sanctuary of minimalist design and quiet reflection, had transformed into a prison. Chloe and I were serving a sentence for a crime we had not committed. Shackled by our love for a baby boy who was technically not ours, we fell into a routine that was punishing. I would wake up at 4 a.m. to feed Leo, changing his diaper in the dim light of the nursery, trying to be as quiet as possible so as not to disturb the tenants in the basement. I would then go to work, designing skyscrapers and libraries for 8 hours, my eyes gritty with sleep deprivation, fueled by black coffee and anxiety. Chloe, who worked from home, bore the brunt of the day shift. She managed the feedings, the naps, and the laundry, all while tiptoeing around Brenda and Kayla like they were volatile explosives. The basement studio had become a separate kingdom with its own laws. Kayla did not act like a mother recovering from birth. She acted like a teenager on spring break. She slept until noon, surfacing only to demand food or to complain about the Wi-Fi speed. In the evenings, she would dress in skirts that were too short for the Seattle chill and disappear into the night with friends she had met online, leaving Brenda to watch television at full volume. One Tuesday night stands out in my memory like a scar. It was raining, a relentless downpour that hammered against the roof. I was in the living room, bouncing a fussy Leo on my hip, trying to finish a blueprint on my laptop. The clock on the mantle chimed 2 a.m. The front door crashed open. Kayla stumbled in, supported by a guy I had never seen before. He was wearing a leather jacket and smelled of stale tobacco. Kayla was laughing, a shrill, hysterical sound that cut through the quiet house. She was wasted. Her eyes were glazed, her lipstick smeared across her cheek. Ish, I hissed, shielding Leo's ears. He is finally sleeping. Kayla looked at me and rolled her eyes. She pushed the guy away. and staggered toward the kitchen. Whatever, she slurred. It is my house, too. She leaned over the kitchen island, reaching for a glass of water, but her coordination was gone. She knocked over a vase of fresh lilies. The vase shattered on the floor, water and glass exploding everywhere. Then she gagged. Before I could move, she vomited. A thick, acrid puddle of tequila and partially digested bar food splashed onto my antique Persian runner rug. The smell was instant and overpowering. I stood there, frozen, clutching the baby. Oops, Kayla giggled. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. You should clean that up. It stains. She turned and stumbled toward the basement stairs, leaving the stranger standing in my foyer. Get out, I told the man. My voice was low and dangerous. He put his hands up and backed out the door. I put Leo in his swing and went to the kitchen. I got down on my hands and knees with a roll of paper towels and a bottle of disinfectant. As I scrubbed the vomit from the wool fibers, I heard footsteps. Brenda was standing at the top of the basement stairs, watching me. She was wearing a silk robe I had bought for her. She is just young. Ruby, Brenda said, yawning. She needs to blow off steam. Postpartum depression manifests in different ways. You should be more understanding. I stopped scrubbing. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream that this was not depression. This was entitlement. This was a complete lack of humanity. But I bit my tongue. I finished cleaning the mess, threw the towels in the trash, and went back to the baby. That was just the prelude. The real tragedy struck 3 days later. Leo got sick. It started with a sniffle, then escalated rapidly to a fever that spiked to 103 degrees. He was miserable. He cried with a high-pitched, frantic wail that tore at my heart. Chloe and I took turns walking him, rocking him, singing to him. We were terrified. We called the pediatrician, who told us to monitor him and give him fluids. But the crying did not stop. It was the second night of the fever. The house felt like a pressure cooker. It was 3 a.m. Leo had been screaming for 4 hours straight. My nerves were frayed. Chloe was weeping silently in the rocking chair, exhausted. Suddenly, the basement door flew open. Kayla stormed up the stairs. She was wearing an oversized t-shirt, and her face was twisted in a mask of pure rage. She did not look worried about the baby. She looked murderous. Shut that thing up, she screamed. I turned to her, holding the hot, sobbing bundle against my chest. He is sick. Kyla, I said, my voice cracking. He has a fever. We are doing our best. I do not care, she yelled, advancing on me. I have a date tomorrow night. I need my beauty sleep. I cannot sleep with this racket. It sounds like a dying cat. She reached out and grabbed a baby bottle that was sitting on the side table. It was heavy glass. Make him stop, she shrieked. She threw the bottle. It missed my head by inches and smashed against the wall behind me, shattering into pieces. Shards of glass rained down on the carpet. One tiny piece nicked my cheek, drawing a bead of blood. Leo, startled by the crash, screamed even harder. I stood there, stunned. She had thrown glass at us. She had thrown glass at her own sick child. Before I could react, Brenda appeared. She rushed up the stairs, but not to restrain her daughter. She came to defend her. Look what you have done. Brenda shouted at me. You have upset her. She is fragile. Are you insane? Chloe stood up, her eyes blazing. She just threw a bottle at Ruby. She could have killed the baby. Brenda stepped between us and Kayla, puffing up her chest like a protective cobra. She is stressed because you two are incompetent. Brenda spat. If you were real mothers, you would know how to soothe him. You are just agitating him with your nervousness. I wiped the blood from my cheek. I looked at the glass on the floor. This is violence. I said quietly, I am calling the police. This ends now. I reached for my phone. Brenda moved faster than I thought possible for a woman of her age. She grabbed my wrist. Her grip was like iron. You will do no such thing. She hissed. Let go of me. I said, listen to me very carefully. Ruby. Brenda's voice dropped to a terrifying whisper. If you call the police, I will ruin you. I tried to pull away, but she held on. I am the moderator of the Neighborhood Homeowners Association Facebook page. Brenda said, I have friends in the church group. I have friends at the local park. Do you know what I will tell them? She smiled, a cold, predatory grimace. I will tell them that Chloe has a temper. I will tell them that I have heard things. So Ding Haoling, to hash is greater than disturbing things. Sao Ding Haoling, to hash is greater than coming from upstairs. I will tell them that I am afraid for my grandson's safety around a person who is Sao Ding Haoling. To hash is greater than confused about their gender. Chloe gasped. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. It was a low blow, a dagger aimed straight at the heart of our deepest fears. We lived in a progressive city, but the suburbs were different. Rumors like that, once planted, grew like poisonous weeds. They could destroy Chloe's graphic design business. They could make us pariahs in our own community. You would not, I whispered. That is a lie. Brenda released my wrist. She smoothed her robe. Who will they believe? Ruby? The grieving grandmother trying to protect her legacy? Or the two women who bought a baby for cash in a diner? She let the question hang in the air. Kayla stood behind her mother, smirking. She looked at Leo, who was still wailing, with a look of pure disgust. Just keep him quiet, Kayla sneered. Or, next time, I will not miss. They turned and walked back down into the darkness of the basement. I stood there in the wreckage of the nursery. The glass glittered on the floor like diamonds. My cheek was stinging. My arms were aching from the weight of the sobbing child. But the heaviest weight was the realization of our reality. We were not just being extorted. We were living with a ticking time bomb. I looked at Chloe. She was shaking. She looked small, defeated. The light in her eyes, the light that I had fallen in love with, was dimming. I walked over to her. I handed her the baby. Then I knelt down and began to pick up the shards of glass one by one. They think they have won, I said, my voice flat. Chloe looked down at me, tears streaming down her face. They have won. Ruby, look at us. We are terrified in our own home. I picked up a large piece of the broken bottle. It was sharp enough to cut skin. I held it in my palm, feeling the edge bite into my flesh. Not yet, I said. My inner monologue shifted then. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I looked at the closed basement door. They had made a fatal error. They had shown me that they were not just greedy, they were dangerous. They had threatened my wife. They had endangered the child. Brenda thought the Homeowners Association was power. She thought rumors were weapons. She had no idea what kind of weapons I could build. I was an architect. I knew how to design traps. I stood up and dropped the glass into the trash can. Go to sleep, Chloe. I said gently, I will take the night shift. I sat in the rocking chair with Leo. I held him close, feeling his feverish heat against my chest. I rocked him until the sun came up, staring at the door, plotting the destruction of the women downstairs. It would not be quick. It would not be simple, but it would be absolute. I was sitting on the floor of my home office, surrounded by shredded paper. It was 3 days after the incident with the bottle, and the house had settled into a terrifying, artificial calm. I had spent the last 48 hours researching criminal defense attorneys, looking up the statutes of limitations on illegal adoption facilitation, and reading horror stories about women who went to prison for exactly what I had done. I was ready to surrender. The fear of Brenda carrying out her threat to destroy Chloe's reputation was a weight I could no longer carry. I was preparing to draft a letter, a surrender of sorts, giving them whatever they wanted just to get them out of our lives. The door creaked open. I did not look up. I assumed it was Brenda coming to gloat or to demand that I run an errand for Kayla, but it was Chloe. She walked into the room and closed the door softly behind her. She locked it. That small click of the deadbolt sounded like a cannon shot in the quiet room. I looked up. Chloe was not crying. Her eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Yes, but the despair I had seen there for weeks was gone. In its place was something cold, sharp, and focused. She was holding her iPad, clutching it like a shield. "Get up, Ruby," she said. Her voice was steady. "I cannot do this anymore." "Chloe," I whispered, putting my head in my hands. "They have us. If we fight, we lose everything. I am going to give them the money. I will take a loan against the house." "Stop it," Chloe snapped. She walked over and knelt beside me. She shoved the iPad into my hands. "Look at this." I blinked, trying to focus on the screen. It was one of the photos I had taken of the will. The image was slightly blurry, taken in haste and panic, but Chloe had enhanced it. As a graphic designer, she had tools that could sharpen edges, adjust contrast, and pull details out of the shadows. I looked at it, but I did not see what she was seeing. It was just legal jargon. "Read the footnote," Chloe commanded. "Section 4, paragraph C." I zoomed in. The text was small, printed in a font size that was meant to be ignored. It was located at the very bottom of the page regarding the distribution of the trust fund. In the event that the biological mother is deemed unfit due to proven negligence, substance abuse, or demonstrated intent to prioritize personal financial gain over the welfare of the child within the first 12 months of life, the trust shall bypass the biological mother entirely. Custody and the monthly stipend shall be awarded to the court-appointed guardian or the actual primary caregiver, provided they can demonstrate a stable environment. I read it twice, then a third time. Brenda told us that if Kayla was unfit, the money would go to charity. I said, my voice trembling, "She lied." Chloe said, "She lied to keep us scared. She lied so we would think we had no leverage." Chloe swiped to the next image. It was a close-up of another clause. Furthermore, any attempt by the biological family to extort, coerce, or manipulate the guardians of the estate shall result in immediate forfeiture of all rights to the inheritance. I looked at Chloe. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Brenda was not just protecting the money. She was terrified of this clause. If we could prove that they were neglecting Leo, and more importantly, if we could prove that they were extorting us, they would lose everything. The $2 million would never touch their hands, but it is our word against theirs. I said, the hope flickering and dying. Brenda is right. We gave them cash. We look like the criminals here. Chloe stood up. She walked over to the bookshelf and pulled down a thick volume on architectural history. She opened it. Inside, The pages had been hollowed out. No, Ruby, she said, it is not our word against theirs. Not anymore. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, black object. It was no larger than a quarter. It was a camera lens. I bought these 3 days ago, Chloe said. I have been testing them. They are high definition, motion activated, and they record audio. I stared at her. My wife, the gentle artist who cried during commercials, had gone full espionage. We are going to bug the house? I asked. We are going to bug every inch of it. Chloe said, the living room, the kitchen, the hallway, and especially the nursery. But Brenda is always watching. I said, how are we going to install them? Chloe looked at me. Her expression softened, but the steel remained. Because you are going to put on the performance of a lifetime. Ruby, you are going to go out there and apologize. You are going to tell Brenda that she won. You are going to tell her that we are broken, that we will do whatever she says. You are going to make her feel so safe, so powerful, that she stops looking over her shoulder. Inner monologue. I looked at the tiny camera in Chloe's hand. It was a violation of privacy. It was illegal in some contexts. It was dangerous. But then I thought about the glass bottle shattering against the wall. I thought about Kayla calling my son a dying cat. I thought about Brenda's smile when she threatened to out my wife to the neighborhood. The law did not matter anymore. Justice mattered. And if I had to become a villain to get justice, then so be it. I stood up. I wiped the tears from my face. I smoothed my shirt. Where do you want me to start? I asked. The installation took 2 hours. We waited until Kayla left for another night of partying and Brenda was in the shower. We worked in silence, moving with the precision of a bomb squad. I hid a camera in the smoke detector in the hallway. Chloe placed one inside a decorative vase on the mantelpiece, angling it perfectly to capture the sofa where Brenda held court. We put one in the kitchen, disguised as a USB charger plugged into the backsplash. The most important one was in the nursery. We placed it inside the baby monitor itself, rigging it so it recorded directly to a cloud server that only Chloe could access. By the time Brenda came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel and smelling of my lavender soap, the house was a trap waiting to be sprung. I found her in the kitchen making tea. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I forced my breathing to slow. I channeled every ounce of fear I had felt over the last month and let it show on my face. I slumped my shoulders. I let my hands tremble. Brenda, I said softly. She turned, a look of annoyance on her face. What is it now? Ruby, I am trying to relax. I took a deep breath. I wanted to talk to you about the agreement. She raised an eyebrow, leaning back against the counter. She looked at me with the disdain one reserves for a crushed insect. I am listening, she said. Sao Tsing Hao, Ling. 2 hash is greater than. I wanted to say that I am sorry. I stammered. I looked down at the floor, refusing to meet her eyes. About the police, about fighting you. I was just Sao Tsing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than I was emotional. I realize now that you are right. Leo belongs to Kayla. We are just Sao Tsing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than helping. Brenda stared at me for a long moment. I could feel her eyes dissecting me, looking for the lie. I held my breath. I needed her to believe that I was broken. I needed her to believe that her threat had worked so completely that I had no fight left. Finally, she let out a long sigh. She smiled. It was the smile of a teacher whose difficult student had finally learned the lesson. I am glad you finally came to your senses. Ruby, she said. She walked over and patted my cheek. Her hand was cold. It takes a big person to admit when they are outmatched. We just want what is best for everyone. As long as you keep the checks coming and keep your wife under control, we will get along fine. Thank you. Brenda, I whispered. I just... Saoyudzing Haling. 2 hash is greater than I do not want any trouble. Please do not tell the neighbors. Oh, honey, she laughed. As long as you are good girls, your secrets are safe with me. Now, be a dear and finish making my tea. I want to watch my show. She turned and walked into the living room. I stood in the kitchen, watching her go. I reached for the kettle. As I poured the hot water, I looked at the USB charger plugged into the wall. A tiny, almost invisible red light blinked once. She was recording. The next 3 days were a masterclass in deception. Chloe and I became the perfect servants. We cooked, we cleaned, we complimented Kayla on her outfits even as she ignored the baby for hours on end. We let Brenda dictate the schedule. We let them believe they were the queens of the castle. And because they felt safe, they got sloppy. The cameras caught everything. They caught Kayla on the phone with a friend, laughing about the idiot lesbians who were paying for her post-pregnancy liposuction. Yeah, I am going to get the surgery next week, Kayla said, pacing around the living room while Leo cried in his swing. Ruby is paying for it. She thinks it is for medical recovery. I swear, that woman would pay for me to go to the moon if I threatened to take the kid away. They caught Brenda discussing the timeline. 10 years is too long. Brenda told Kayla over dinner. Once the trust fund vests at 5 years for the initial payout, we will take him back then. We will say the environment here has become toxic. We will get a lawyer to prove they alienated his affections. We will get the boy and the money, but the smoking gun, the piece of evidence that would drive the nail into their coffin, came on Saturday night. It was date night for Kayla again. She was getting ready in the downstairs bathroom, but the door was open. Brenda was in the hallway, holding Leo. The baby spit up on Brenda's blouse. Brenda recoiled as if she had been burned. "You little brat," she shrieked. "Look what you did. This is silk." She shoved the baby roughly into the carrier, not bothering to support his head. Leo started to cry. "I am so sick of this." Brenda hissed to Kyla, "I cannot wait until we can dump him in a boarding school. Once we get the full custody rights back, he is going straight to that military academy in Switzerland. I do not want to see his face until he is 18 and signing the checks." Kayla laughed, applying mascara. "Just make sure he survives until then." "Mom, he is our meal ticket. If he dies, we are back to the trailer park." I was watching the feed on my iPad in the bedroom upstairs. I had headphones on. I heard every word. Every syllable was captured in crystal clear high definition. "He is our meal ticket." I took the headphones off. I looked at Chloe. She was sitting on the bed, her face pale but determined. "We have it," Chloe said. "We have the intent to exploit. We have the admission of neglect. We have the conspiracy to defraud the trust." I stood up. The fear that had paralyzed me for weeks was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, righteous anger. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the people who had tried to push me off, and realizing that I was the one holding the rope. "Is it enough?" I asked. "It is enough to bury them," Chloe said. She closed the iPad. "Tomorrow is Sunday," she said. "Brenda goes to church in the morning. Kayla sleeps in until 1. "What happens tomorrow?" I asked. "Tomorrow," Chloe said, standing up and walking to the window to look down at the rain-soaked street. Tomorrow, we invite them to a special dinner. We tell them we want to renegotiate the terms of the guardianship to give them more money. Why? I asked. Because Chloe turned to me, her eyes glittering in the dark. We need them to say it one more time, to our faces. While the lawyer is listening in the other room, I nodded. A plan formed in my mind. A dinner, a celebration, the Last Supper. I will cook. I said, I will make their favorite, and then, I thought, I will serve them their own destruction on a silver platter. Sunday evening arrived with the gray, suffocating dampness, typical of a Seattle autumn, inside the house. However, the atmosphere was carefully engineered to be warm and inviting. The smell of roasted rosemary chicken and garlic mashed potatoes filled the air, masking the scent of betrayal that had permeated the walls for weeks. I had set the dining table with our best china, the Wedgwood plates we usually reserved for Thanksgiving, and polished the crystal wine glasses until they gleamed under the dim amber lights of the chandelier. It was a stage, and we had set it perfectly for the final act. Chloe was in the kitchen, finishing the gravy. Her hands were steady as she whisked, but I could see the tension in the set of her jaw. We had checked the cameras 3 times. We had tested the audio levels, the hidden microphone in the centerpiece. A lush arrangement of hydrangeas was transmitting clearly to the laptop hidden in the pantry, where our attorney, Mr. Sterling, no relation to the deceased billionaire, but a shark in his own right, was listening via a secure stream. I went to the top of the basement stairs and opened the door. Dinner is ready, I called out, forcing a cheerful lilt into my voice. Brenda and Kayla emerged a few minutes later. They looked like royalty descending to mingle with the peasantry. Brenda was wearing a sequined blouse that was too tight across the chest, and Kayla was in sweatpants, looking bored and scrolling through her phone. Smells decent, Kayla muttered, dropping into her chair without waiting for anyone else. I am starving. Breastfeeding is a joke. I stopped yesterday. My boobs were getting saggy. Brenda sat at the head of the table, the spot she had claimed as her own since the day she arrived. She picked up the wine bottle, an expensive vintage I had decanted earlier, and poured herself a generous glass. Well, Brenda said, swirling the red liquid, it is nice to see you making an effort. Ruby, a happy home requires submission to the natural order of things. I sat down opposite her. Chloe brought the platter of chicken to the table and took her seat beside me. We held hands under the table, her grip tight and cold. We wanted to have a special dinner. I began, my voice trembling slightly. It was not fake. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might bruise my ribs. We have been thinking about what you said, Brenda, about the arrangement. Brenda took a sip of wine, her eyes glittering over the rim of the glass. Go on. We know that $5,000 a month is generous, I said, lying through my teeth. But we also know that raising a child of this 少於正學齡 doi caliber 少於正學齡 2 is greater than requires more. And we know that you, Kayla, have needs. You are young. You sacrificed your body for this. Kayla looked up from her plate. Her interest piqued. Finally, someone gets it. Do you know I have stretch marks? It is disgusting. I feel like a deflated balloon. We want to offer a new deal, I said. I leaned forward, looking directly into the hidden camera in the flowers. We are willing to give you a lump sum now, $20,000, cash, in exchange. We want to formalize the 10-year custody agreement today. With no interference. Brenda frowned, calculating. 20,000? That is a lot of cash. Ruby, where are you getting it? Does it matter? Chloe interjected softly. We just want peace. We want to raise Leo without looking over our shoulders. Brenda laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. She reached out and patted Chloe's hand condescendingly. Oh, honey, you will always be looking over your shoulders. That is the price you pay for what you did. What do you mean? I asked, pushing the bait closer. You bought a baby, Brenda said, her voice loud and clear. She took another drink, her inhibitions lowered by the alcohol and her own arrogance. You paid $10,000 in a diner to bypass the adoption laws. You are criminals. We own you. I felt a cold thrill run down my spine. That was admission number 1. Kyla Chimedin, her mouth full of chicken. Yeah, and honestly, 20,000 is low. Do you know how much a trip to Hawaii costs? I want to go to Maui next month. I need a break from that screaming thing. That thing? I asked quietly. You mean Leo? Whatever. Kayla waved her fork dismissively. He is just a noise machine right now. I hate it. I hate the smell of milk. I hate the crying. I just want the money. When he is 18, I get the 2 million, right? That is the deal. You guys do the dirty work. Change the diapers. Deal with the tantrums. I show up when he is legal, collect my check, and buy a condo in Miami. Inner monologue. I watched her face as she said it. There was no love there, no maternal instinct buried under postpartum hormones. There was only greed. She spoke of her son like he was a savings bond that took too long to mature. I felt a surge of protectiveness for Leo so strong it almost brought tears to my eyes. He was sleeping upstairs, innocent and perfect, while his biological mother planned to harvest him for cash. So you have no intention of raising him? Chloe asked, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. Even after 10 years? God, no. Kayla scoffed. She poured herself more wine. Mom said we can just send him to boarding school or something. As long as he is alive and breathing, we get the payout. Why would I want to ruin my 20s raising a kid? Brenda nodded in agreement. The boy is an investment. Ruby, you are the caretakers of the asset. We are the board of directors. And frankly, if you do not pay for Kayla's trip to Hawaii, we might just decide that your home is unsafe. I could make one phone call to the police and tell them about the cash bribe. There it was. Extortion, blackmail, conspiracy to defraud a trust, neglect. It was all there, recorded in high definition, backed up to a cloud server that our lawyer was currently accessing. I looked at Brenda. The fear I had carried for weeks evaporated. I sat up straighter. I let go of Chloe's hand and placed both of my hands on the table. You are right, Brenda, I said. My voice was different now. It was the voice I used in boardrooms when I was tearing apart a contractor's faulty design. It was cold, hard, and final. It is an investment. Brenda paused, the glass halfway to her mouth. She sensed the shift. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. What is that tone? Ruby, I am just thinking about the terms. I said, you said you own us. You said we are criminals. We are. Brenda sneered. I stood up. I picked up my napkin and folded it neatly next to my plate. I think we are done here, I said. Brenda slammed her glass down. Wine sloshed onto the white tablecloth, staining it like blood. Sit down, she barked. Who do you think you are talking to? I am talking to a woman who just confessed to extortion and conspiracy to commit fraud, I said calmly. Kayla laughed nervously. What is she talking about? Mom? I pointed to the flowers. Smile. Brenda, you are on camera. Brenda followed my finger. She saw the glint of the lens amidst the hydrangeas. Her face went slack. The color drained from her skin, leaving her looking gray and old. What? Sao Ding Ho, Ling. 2 hash is greater than what is that? She whispered. That is a direct feed to my attorney. I said, and to the secure server of the Sterling Family Trust. They have heard every word. They heard you call your son an asset. They heard you admit to blackmail. They heard Kayla say she hates the child and only wants the money. Kayla stood up, knocking her chair over. You bitch. You cannot do that. That is illegal. Actually, I said, leaning in. In the state of Washington, recording a conversation in your own home where there is no reasonable expectation of privacy, like a dinner party, is a gray area, but recording evidence of a felony in progress, that is admissible. And blackmail, Kayla, is a felony. Brenda stood up. She was shaking. Her arrogance had crumbled into dust. You gave us the money, she shrieked. You are just as guilty. You will go to jail too, maybe, I said. I shrugged. I am willing to take that risk. I am willing to stand in front of a judge and say I made a desperate mistake because I wanted to be a mother. But you are not a mother. You are a monster. And no judge in this country is going to give you that baby or that money after hearing this tape. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the rain hammering against the window, washing away the dirt of the outside world, while inside, the filth was finally being exposed. I walked over to the pantry door and opened it. The laptop was sitting on the shelf, the screen glowing. A voice came from the speakers. It was deep and authoritative. Mrs. Brenda Johnson, this is Arthur Sterling's estate attorney. I advise you to remain where you are. The police have been notified and are en route. Kayla screamed. It was a high, thin sound of pure terror. She looked at her mother, then at me, and then she ran. She ran toward the front door, not toward the baby upstairs. Brenda collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her hands. I looked at Chloe. She was crying, but they were tears of relief. It is over, I whispered, but as sirens began to wail in the distance, cutting through the night air, I knew it was not truly over. The private war was won, but the public fallout was just beginning. We had detonated a bomb in our own living room, and we were all going to have to walk through the fire to get to the other side. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Rainier Tower was cold. It was a sterile, hermetically sealed glass box that floated above the gray skyline of Seattle. The air smelled of lemon polish and expensive leather, a stark contrast to the scent of stale wine and fear that had permeated my dining room only 48 hours prior. I sat at the long mahogany table, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my fingers were numb. Chloe sat beside me, her posture rigid, staring at a smudge on the polished wood surface. Across from us sat the representatives of the Sterling Family Trust. They were 3 men in charcoal suits who looked less like lawyers and more like undertakers. At the far end of the table, isolated like a virus in a petri dish, sat Brenda and Kayla. They looked diminished, without the backdrop of my home to invade, without the power dynamic they had manufactured. They were just 2 small, desperate women caught in a spotlight they had not expected. Brenda was wearing her Sunday best, a floral dress that looked garish against the sleek modernism of the office. She refused to look at me. Kayla was chewing her fingernail, her leg bouncing nervously under the table. The lead attorney for the trust, a man named Mr. Blackwood, pressed a button on the console in front of him. The recording began to play. It was the audio from the dinner party. My voice, shaking but determined, filled the room. Then Brenda's voice, arrogant and slurred by wine. Then Kayla's laughter, sharp and cruel. He is just a noise machine right now. I hate it. I just want the money. The boy is an investment. Ruby, you are the caretakers of the asset. I watched the faces of the lawyers. They did not flinch. They did not gasp. They simply took notes, their pens scratching against legal pads with a rhythmic, damning sound. When the recording ended, the silence that followed was suffocating. Mr. Blackwood removed his reading glasses and folded them slowly. He looked at Brenda, his expression one of mild distaste, as if he had just stepped in something unpleasant on the sidewalk. The terms of the late Arthur Sterling's will are explicit, Mr. Blackwood said. His voice was dry and devoid of emotion. The primary objective of the trust is the welfare of the child. Clause 4. Section C clearly states that any demonstrated intent by the biological parent to exploit the estate for personal gain results in immediate disqualification. He tapped the file in front of him. You called the child an asset. Mrs. Johnson, you admitted to a conspiracy to defraud the trust by hiding the child's living conditions. And your daughter admitted to having no interest in the child's physical or emotional well-being. Brenda stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. That tape was illegal, she shouted, her voice cracking. She entrapped us. She got us drunk. Mr. Blackwood did not even blink. The tape has been admitted as evidence in the custody hearing due to the admission of a felony. Specifically, extortion. The trust has made its decision. He turned his gaze to Kayla. Kayla Marie Johnson, you are hereby stripped of all rights to the Sterling Family Trust. You will not receive a single cent. Furthermore, we have filed a petition with the family court to terminate your parental rights based on admitted neglect and intent to abandon. Kayla's mouth fell open. She looked at her mother, then back at the lawyer. But Xiao Tsinghaoling, 2# is greater than but $2 million. She stammered. I need that money. I have plans. You have nothing, Mr. Blackwood said coldly. Then he turned to me. I felt my heart stop. This was the moment I had been dreading. The victory over Brenda was sweet, but I knew it came with a cost. I had broken the law too. I had paid the bribe. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Blackwood said, we have also reviewed your role in this. Xiao Tsinghaoling, 2 dièse est supérieur à transaction. I swallowed hard. I did. I take full responsibility. You made an undocumented cash payment of $10,000 to a biological mother. He recited, in the eyes of the state, that is a serious offense. I looked at Chloe. She reached out and took my hand. We had discussed this. We were ready. I did it to save the boy, I said quietly. I knew what they were. I knew if I did not pay, they would take him somewhere else, somewhere unsafe. Mr. Blackwood studied me for a long moment. For the first time, his eyes softened. Just a fraction. The district attorney has been consulted, he said, given your cooperation in exposing the fraud against the trust, and considering the extortion you were subjected to, they are willing to offer a plea deal. I held my breath. You will plead guilty to a misdemeanor charge of improper facilitation of an adoption, he said. You will pay a fine of $50,000. You will perform 500 hours of community service, and you will be on probation for 2 years. And the boy? I whispered. What about Leo? Mr. Blackwood opened a new folder. The trust has petitioned for you and your wife to be named the permanent legal guardians of the child. The $2 million, however, will be placed in a blind trust. It will be donated to a charity for orphan children if Leo does not claim it at age 21. You will receive no stipend. You will raise him on your own dime. I let out a sob. It was a raw, ugly sound that I could not suppress. I did not care about the money. I never cared about the money. We accept, I said. We accept everything. Brenda let out a screech of rage. You are giving the baby to them? To the criminals? This is a fix. Security? Mr. Blackwood said calmly into his intercom. Please escort Mrs. Johnson and her daughter out of the building. 2 large security guards entered the room. Brenda tried to pull away, shouting curses at me, at Chloe, at the ghost of Arthur Sterling. Kayla just sat there, weeping, not for her son, but for her lost fortune. As they were dragged out of the room, Brenda looked back at me one last time. Her eyes were filled with a hatred so pure it felt like a physical burn. This is not over. Ruby, she screamed, you will never be safe. The heavy glass doors hissed shut, cutting off her voice. I sat there in the silence, shaking. It was over. We had won, but I did not feel triumphant. I felt hollowed out. I felt like a survivor of a shipwreck who had washed ashore. Alive, but battered. We walked out of the building an hour later. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still a bruised purple. I looked at Chloe. She looked older than she had a month ago. There were fine lines around her eyes that had not been there before. We are felons, Chloe said softly, staring at the wet pavement, or at least misdemeanants. We are mothers. I corrected her. I thought about the nursery at home. It was no longer a place of innocent dreams. It was a bunker. It was a fortress we had defended with lies and cameras and money. I wondered if the taint of this battle would ever wash off. I wondered if, when I looked at Leo, I would always see the ghost of the bargain I had made. I took Chloe's hand. Let us go home, I said. Leo is waiting. We walked to the car in silence, the city moving around us. Indifferent to the war we had just fought. We had the baby. We had our lives. But the innocence was gone, replaced by a scar that would ache every time it rained. 6 months after the hearing, the dust has finally settled, leaving a landscape that is both familiar and irrevocably changed. I sat at my kitchen table, the same marble surface where Brenda had once demanded I sign away my rights, and wrote a check. It was made out to the state of Washington for $50,000. It was the final installment of my fine for facilitating an illegal adoption. Writing that sum hurt. It was our savings. It was the money we had set aside for renovations. But as I tore the check from the book, the sound was the most satisfying thing I had heard in years. It was the sound of a ransom being paid, not to kidnappers, but to the truth. We did not get the $2 million. The trust was true to its word. The money was locked away in a charitable fund for at-risk youth, inaccessible to Leo until he turns 21. And even then, only for educational purposes. We are raising him on an architect's salary and a graphic designer's income. We buy diapers at Costco. We worry about the rising cost of preschool. We are delightfully, beautifully average. But karma, as it turns out, has a sense of humor, and it is ruthless. Brenda and Kayla did not just lose the baby and the fortune, they lost their anonymity. The recording of the dinner party was not public, but the court filings were. In the small, gossip-fueled ecosystem of the suburbs, news travels faster than light. Brenda was removed from her position as the moderator of the Homeowners Association due to moral turpitude. The church group she ruled with an iron fist politely asked her to stop attending after the scandal broke. But the final blow was financial, because Brenda and Kayla had admitted to extortion and fraud in a civil deposition. The Sterling estate countersued for legal fees and damages. They were ordered to pay back the $10,000 I had given them, plus interest, and an additional $40,000 in legal costs to the trust. They were bankrupt. I saw them one last time outside the courthouse yesterday. They were not leaving in a luxury car. They were waiting for the bus. They were screaming at each other. "You ruined this." "Mom," Kayla was yelling, her face blotchy and devoid of makeup. "You got greedy. We could have had $5,000 a month. I told you to keep your mouth shut," Brenda shrieked back, clutching her fake designer bag, which now looked pathetic rather than intimidating. "You are the one who said you hated the brat on tape." I watched them from the safety of my car. They looked small. They looked miserable. They were trapped in a prison of their own making, bound together not by love, but by debt and mutual blame. They had treated a human life like a lottery ticket, and they had torn it up in their haste to cash it. I rolled up the window and drove away. I did not feel glee. I did not feel the need to gloat. I just felt a profound sense of closure. They were no longer monsters under my bed. They were just two unhappy women waiting for a bus in the rain. When I got home, Chloe was in the nursery. The sun was breaking through the clouds, casting a warm, golden light across the room. She was holding Leo, who was now 6 months old. He was laughing, a bubbling, joyous sound that filled the corners of the house where the shadows used to live. "He has your eyes," Chloe said, looking up at me. I walked over and wrapped my arms around both of them. I looked at my son. He was not a $2 million asset. He was a boy who needed a diaper change and a bottle. He was a boy who would scrape his knees and have his heart broken and learn to ride a bike. I thought about the money we had lost. I thought about the criminal record I now had. I thought about the scars on my reputation. Then I looked at Leo, grabbing Chloe's finger, holding on with a strength that defied his size. Brenda and Kayla had wanted to sell him. They saw a price tag where I saw a soul. I kissed his forehead, smelling the scent of milk and baby powder, the only perfume that mattered. "The money is gone," I whispered to him, my inner monologue finally quiet, finally at peace. And that is okay, because the things that truly matter in this life are the things you can never put a price on. I looked out the window one last time, imagining Brenda standing in the rain, counting her pennies. This child is priceless, I thought, but your greed, Brenda, that was cheap. It was the cheapest thing I have ever seen. I turned my back on the window and walked fully into the light of the nursery, ready to be a mother.